introduce you to a brand new family here to Riley Radio Days. And before we get into her story, I just want to say Kelsey came in a couple weeks ago to tell us her story of her daughter. We're so thankful because for any of these families that you've been hearing today, these stories, whether they have happy endings or not, these are not easy stories to tell. And we're asking of so much of them to be honest and vulnerable and open and tell us the difficult parts and the happy parts. And so it takes a lot of courage for these families to come in here to the recording studio. So we're just so thankful for all those families.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I know also a lot of families want to get it out, get their story out, and let people understand what happens down in Indianapolis. It's not just a children's hospital in Indianapolis. It's really a place where miracles do really happen.
Amen. A story you've never heard before. Here's Kelsey.
We had an accident, a car accident at home. My youngest daughter was 7 years old. It was winter 2023. Early in the year, we had a car accident in the driveway where she had fallen down and was ran over. We called 911 immediately. Police and ambulance showed up at the house. She was transferred from our driveway because of weather conditions. She was unable to be flown in the helicopter. So there was an ice storm that day, and they said typically speaking she would have been airlifted immediately. They weren't able to because of the conditions. Her leg was completely detached. The femoral head was still lodged into the hip socket, but the femur was completely detached from the femoral head. Typically speaking, with that sort of injury, they do immediately fly from home to a children's hospital to handle that. But like I said, because of the conditions, she was taken to the ambulance, and they were not equipped to handle her situation. They were able to medicate her. She was treated in the ER there, but we were there for about 3 or 4 hours, and nursing staff started to say, hey, she needs to go to a special hospital. We were distraught. We honestly, we didn't know, okay, does she live or die? When something of that magnitude happens, your brain just immediately goes to the worst. And they were telling us that because of where the leg was detached, the blood flow was disrupted. And if they were not able to reattach her leg to the femoral head, that if there was blood flow disruption for 24 hours, that she could lose her leg. So, we were panicked. And, when in an emergent situation, everything's magnified and you're concerned and scared. But when they tell you there's a time constraint on it, then it's okay, let's get going. But when you're ready to go, let's get our kid fixed, let's get to the next step, but you're waiting on ambulance, you're waiting on life flight and waiting on approvals and paperwork and doctors. They're telling you, okay, your child could lose their leg if this is not treated within 24 hours. And then you're watching the clock go by. Okay, it's been 20 hours and you're gripping the chair and you're watching your child lay there, white knuckle the edges of the hospital bed, and you're not receiving the care that they're telling you that she has to have. Your urgency to get this done isn't necessarily what's going to happen. It was terrifying. We had a really wonderful nurse that came in the ER, and she was like, look, most of the people who work in this hospital are travel nurses. She's like, I've been here all my life. She's like, I'm telling you that if this was my child, you would send them to Riley. You need to get your child to Riley. And then it was a no-brainer. It was like, okay, let's go immediately. I had never been there. I'd never seen it before. We were like, let's not waste any more time. They had already told us. The issue is when the femoral head was in the hip socket and the femur was detached, then you run into the issue of the femoral head dying. As soon as you get the bones reattached, then everything starts the femoral head were to die, then she would have to have like a replacement or an artificial part, or the growth plates could be disrupted, and then maybe her leg wouldn't have grown at all. So that, I mean, they're telling us all these things and telling us that they weren't exactly equipped to handle the long-term care. We waited a long time, hours. I mean, they took us right up to hour 22. We arrived at Riley at hour 24. Through that night, I mean, my husband and I are just sitting there with our heads leaned against her bed, like not capable of sleeping. At hour 22, then the ambulance team came in. We unfortunately were not able to ride in the ambulance with her, so we're sending our 7-year-old child in the wee hours of the morning with people we've never met before, with icy road conditions, alone to a hospital we'd never been to before in a big city. And my goodness, we're going to Indianapolis, and we weren't able to follow behind. So it's like my husband's driving like Mario Andretti, and I'm like, you know, I'm crying, he's crying, it's snowing, and we beat the ambulance there by half an hour. I am telling you, you know, like when they say like the heavens open up and it's kind of like, ah. When they brought her in and we saw her coming in, the swarm of nurses around her were like that moment when they say like the heavens opened up and there was light shining. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there was a swarm of people. She had a team of people who were making sure that she felt like a kid. They were bringing her toys and comfort items and asking questions about her favorite colors and her favorite shows and what does she like to do, just to distract her from that injury. We had a doctor team, we had a surgical team, we had a nursing team. At Riley, it was amazing. Everybody knew what was going on. Everyone had reviewed the case before they stepped foot into the room. My husband and I were just really, really impressed with the care. They made sure that my kid was comfortable. And it was really scary to go through something like that, but they made sure that all the bases were covered. So she had her surgery. We had the most amazing surgeon. I am so impressed. We had one surgeon that was booked and that was coming in, and they called in a specialist who was a limb specialist, and I can't even hardly think about him without crying. But so Dr. Puryear came in. He just like looked me in the eye and was like, "Mom, it's gonna be okay. Like, I've got your kid." And he's like, "You do not have to worry about your little girl." And he came in. Surgery was almost 4 hours. He came out of surgery and he was like, "No concerns. We've got everything reattached." The series after that, so we had quite a few trips back and forth. She had to have x-rays, a lot of x-rays, to make sure that everything was fusing and growing properly back together. Initially, she was in a body brace. She had around her torso and down to the leg to stabilize and to keep her from moving. Dr. Puryear said that was more to make sure she was still, because she had to stay still for, as soon as the brace came off, he knew it was, off to the races. So she was a little bit afraid. And that was 7 weeks after the surgery. We drove back and forth. We did like a couple times a month, and then once a month. And then it just kind of, spaced them out a little bit further. Praise God, she's healed. We were like, it's going to be okay. Her leg's going to be okay. Growth plates were not disrupted, so that was wonderful. She wasn't able to go back to school. She was in first grade, and but she finished out the school year at home, and we were able to get the schoolwork from her teacher. And the accident was in March, and she was still in a brace, still in a wheelchair in May. And at this point in time, we had cabin fever. We were so stressed, but we were able to get out of the house in May, and we just packed her up and went down to Turkey Run State Park, and we were able to get out of the house and just kind of enjoy life again. So it was a couple months after the operation where we were like, okay, we need to start living again. She is very bubbly, super funny. She loves to dance. She really hasn't changed since the accident. It was just one of those things. It was a hiccup, it was a hurdle, and she is still lively and bubbly and and funny and creative. She's still a great kid. Overall, she's healed really well, and we really don't notice unless like now it's really cold outside right now, and she'll notice some pain in her hip. So she's kind of like a little old lady in that respect. But other than that, she's done really well.
And thanks again to Kelsey, who came to the studio and told us the story about, and what a scary, scary situation right from the beginning. And she said at the end of the story, loves to dance still to this day. And the day that accident happened, she was dressed in her dance outfit, ready to go to dance class that night when that terrible accident happened. And just could have been so much worse. But thankfully, Nora ended up at Riley Children's Hospital. And you hear so many stories that end that exact way, by these parents saying, thankfully, we ended up at Riley Children's Hospital.
Yeah, I'd say this is the first I've heard this story, and wow, I just cannot fathom what they went through for those 24 hours. That is a harrowing 24 hours as a parent. I absolutely can't imagine that.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, for sharing your story. Thanks for allowing Mom to talk about you for a little bit, and being a part of the Riley Radio Days family. We love to have you as a part of the family here, and we're so fortunate that you're able and allowing us to share your story. And we're so happy that doing so well to this day. And so you still have a chance to be a champion of the hour right now by calling.
When I read through everything that Riley does, Riley is the state's only level 1 pediatric trauma center. Okay. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, if Riley doesn't exist and that poor little girl has to go, farther away, she probably doesn't have her leg.
Yeah.
So
you heard Kelsey say, like, normally they would put a child like this on a life flight, like right away.
yes.
But there was a terrible ice storm that night, and they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so they had to go lights and sirens from Fort Wayne all the way to Indianapolis.
Yeah. Well, what an amazing story. I'm so happy to hear doing great and dancing and enjoying life. That's what Riley does for these families.